most of us, and he tries to set up the games, and Bob and I were always on the losing side. But anyway, we want to share some of our memories, because this is how we remember Bob. We love Bob. Mark?
I'll try to struggle through this. Like John said, we eat lunch every day together. And spring, summer, and fall, at least 2 to 4 of us would play golf somewhere. We also went on golf trips. We learned that if you're riding in a cart with Bob, after you get to know him, you learn a lot about Bob. He told us, we called him the Yankee. He told us that we Kentuckians mispronounced his native state's name. It was Massachusetts, not Massachusetts. We learned that he caddied at a golf course as a teenager and through college, where he met his lifelong friend, Lynch. He attended Colby College in Maine. He made a living as an insurance underwriter. He loved to read, but to my knowledge, being the Yankee that he was, he never bought a book. He borrowed them from other people. And I think he made sure every day that his library card was up to date. We also learned how he met Sharon. And Sharon, we're glad you did, but it's hard to believe that you took Tony King's recommendation. And out on the golf course, we learned quickly that Bob had a great golf swing. If there's anything that I want from Bob, it's his golf swing. But we did learn another thing. He couldn't putt. One day we're on the course here at Eagle Creek. He lined up a putt. He hit it, and it went 4 to 5 feet to the left of the hole, and at least 4 to 5 feet past the hole. John and I looked at each other. I looked at Bob, and I said, "Bob, did you play ice hockey as a kid?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, that was a slap shot." We learned he really didn't like real hot weather. In July and August, he wouldn't play a lot with us. But then in late October or early November, when the temperature was 40 to 45 degrees, he would ask us to play. And when we would turn him down, saying it was too cold, he would tell us that this was summer weather in Maine. And Bob didn't always play with us in the afternoon. Sometimes he played in what they call down at Eagle Creek the morning game. He would text us maybe in advance that he was going to play in the morning game. Or he would tell us at lunch, "I won't be here tomorrow, I'm playing up at Eagle Creek." And then the next time we saw him, he would tell us that how much money he won. And most of the time it was how much money he lost, which he hated. But there's another member of our group that plays in that game too. And like John said, well, we won't go there. But I looked at him one day on the course. He was saying, "I won't be here tomorrow, fellas. I'm playing in the morning game." I said, "Bob, you need to play with us." Martin, I mean the morning game people, they only want your money. All we want is your friendship. And I'm very proud to say, Bob was my friend.
Well, as Mark said, we had a lot of fun playing golf with Bob. One of the things about Bob that as years got on, Bob started double hitting every chip. Not every chip, but a lot of them every now and then. Which is hard to do, really. But Bob, for some reason, had an inclination when he would start chipping, he would double chip. And double hit. He wanted to add 2 more strokes plus those 2, which wasn't right. It's only 2 strokes. But he'd get down on himself a little bit. He would talk about not playing. Of course, we all knew that he would be back. He never gave up. And like Mark said, I'd love to have his golf swing. Smooth, fluid, just what somebody want to teach somebody. Yeah, he'd paddle a bit, but he'd be back. Didn't last long. Gary, there's one thing I can tell you about him. Even though double hits, bad putts, he never used some of the language these other guys used. We all But I would say what Mark said. I was honored to be Bob's friend.
Bob was cheap. We'd play golf together, and a lot of times we'd go on little trips, not long, but we'd pick Bob up, and he'd come out with the oldest, ugliest shirts. I don't know where he got this. And then his hat was even worse. But it didn't matter, Bob. We'd keep on him and on him on him. And the next time we go pick him up, the outfit would be worse.
You know, a more politically correct group would say Bob is frugal. Bob is cheap. You know, we never could fix Bob's speech. You know, at Wendy's, we'd say, Bob, just say, howdy, y'all. It just never worked with Bob. You know, we'd tease Bob and say, where do the Red Sox play? He said, Fenway Park. I said, no, Bob, it's a park. It's not a mark on your face. It's not a scar. It's a park. P-A-R-K. He said, yeah, Fenway Park. So it never did work. But as John alluded to, we all played a lot of golf with Bob, and we never did see Bob actually purchase a golf ball in his life. And he would play with the most awful-looking golf balls. It didn't matter if it was green, orange, white, or whatever. It didn't matter if it had cuts on it, mud on it. If it was round and had dimples, Bob played with it. Okay? So, in February of '09, it is one of those rare winter days where we looked at the weather forecast and decided, and we did this quite often, let's drive far enough where it's going to be warm to play golf. You know, we may be old, but we got young and heart. Let's just get in the car and go south until it gets warm, and we'll play golf there. So we looked at the weather forecast. Southern Kentucky on February the 9th, 2009 was going to be a high of 72 degrees. Okay? A rare winter day. So John and Ken and Bob and I jumped in the car, drove to Somerset to play golf. Beautiful day. Sun was out. We were having a great time. We were having such a great time that we decided on number 4 to call Mark Hudson to remind him he was still at work and we were playing golf. The conversation was very curt and he cut us off quickly. But we got around about number 8. And number 8, I think it was, had a ravine to the right side of the fairway, and it was almost like a single. And Bob, even though with that fluid golf swing, managed to hit one awry. And it went off to the right side of the fairway, went down to that hole. And you can imagine the joy that went through Bob when he would find a lost golf ball. It was like a little kid on Easter and Christmas combined. I mean, his eyes lit up. Look what I found. So, and he was not going to let his golf ball be found by anybody else. We would be there all day. If he hit one in the Grand Canyon, he would go after it. Okay? So, Bob hit one in this ravine, and he was in there for a couple minutes and came out. So you wouldn't believe this. There's balls everywhere. He would throw balls out the hole, and he'd go back in. And go back in and find some more balls. And he had his golf ball just loaded. I mean, his bag just loaded with golf balls. Couldn't hardly carry it. It was so heavy. He said, I've never seen anything like this. So at the turn, after number 9, we go in, and Bob is getting him a bottle of water. And the guy at the pro shop behind the desk said, how you guys doing? Bob said, you wouldn't believe this. It's a great day. You wouldn't believe how many balls I found. Well, back there on number 8, he said, wait a minute, number 8? it's February. If that's the middle of the summer, that hole would be full of copperhead snakes. That's why it had all those golf balls in it. Well, Bob looked at us and his eyes were like saucers. His face was priceless. And from then on, every time he hit one awry, you know, that little twinkle in Bob's eye and that grin and that New England accent, he looked at me and said, "Any copperheads?" I said, "Not there." Again, we're going to miss Bob, a fantastic person, but he's in all of our hearts.
Well, I appreciate that I'm the last one, so I can say something about them guys and they can't say nothing about me. Hold on a second. There's a reason for that, right, Pastor James? There's a reason for that. Actually, I'll tell you, my father-in-law's been in the ministry for 60 years, right? And I told Pastor, I said, he ain't gonna believe this. Me standing in the so we'll take a picture, we'll send it to him. First, let me say, I appreciate that John still remembers all our names. This time I want to apologize to Bob because I'm the one that has to tell everybody out there this story. And it's quite a story. And I can see Bob sitting in one of his tree swings now, probably laughing his hind end off at all of us standing up there and thinking like, I got the last laugh and you don't. Anyway, we are going to play Houston Oaks, which was, you go from Georgetown across that 2-lane highway over towards Paris. And Nobby Knees, that would be Bob, was sitting in the back. And Buck 80, that would be John, was in the back with him. Up front was me. With me was Shankopoulos, otherwise known as Shanks, that would be Donnie. And I'm driving. Okay. When you got in the car with us, you better have your thick skin on, okay? Because you know, you're going to get a riding, you're going to get jokes told about you. Matter of fact, you probably would do that before you even got the doors closed on the car. So as we're driving, all of a sudden, I can't remember exactly what the conversation was, but Bob says, "I'm older than my father." It was like time stood still. I looked in my mirror, and I knew right then Bob knew that was the wrong thing to say. Because that was one of those things we kind of wrote on our brain. We are not going to forget this. Okay? So I look in the mirror, and John says, "Bob, what did you say?" He said, "You said you're older than your father." And Bob said, "I know." And Bob never said, "I know." You know what he was older. I know. So he knew what he had done. Well, we never forgot that. Every now and then that would be brought up another time, you know, just at the right opportune time. A couple of Saturdays ago, my wife Liz and I were visiting Bob in the hospital. And we had talked, had a great time, you know, laughing, cutting up, which we always did. And all of a sudden, Bob's sister had just walked in the room. She had just flown in. And so I looked at Bob and I said, "Is she older than your father, too?" Shakes his head like that, you know, this is not the time. He says, "No." Well, his sister heard this and she says, "I want nothing to do with it." She knew nothing about it. So I said, "Well, now, Bob, if she's not, does that mean your father is in between you and your sister?" He's a middle person. Bob says, "I know." That was a story of Bob that I'm sure he didn't want everybody to know about. Anyway, I was at a seminar one time in New Hampshire, and I heard this guy talk, and his talk was, "What makes a man great? Have you found it?" The whole time he talked, every now and then he said, "What makes a man great? Have you found it?" I'm here to tell you, well, I found it. Amen.
Bob was he liked trivia. I think, did you all play trivia all the time? And he told me just couple, 3 weeks ago, it really didn't amount to a whole lot, but you knew. Yeah, sorry, bad joke. Not you, he loved the kid, but Bob is a part of our local trivia. Here's a trivia question for you. Do you know the only 3 people that we know of that have played Pebble Beach, the famous Pebble Beach course, Augusta National, where the Masters is played, and St. Andrews, the old course, and Eagle Creek? Those people are professional golfer Steve Flesh, professional golfer J.B. Holmes, Bob Tripp. So remember that, that's a good tribute. Aside from golf, Bob loved books. He loved words. And if you ever text with him, half the time you didn't know what he was talking about because you get a text and most of my answering was, what? As I said earlier, he loved geography, and we would talk about Martin and Sullivan travel a lot in Kentucky. They talked about basketball teams from way back at some little podunk town in Kentucky that were famous. And Bob said, where is that? And we'd try to tell him, but he would go home, he'd get out his atlas, and he would find out exactly where that town was, and then he'd bring up the conversation the next day because he thought he knew something. I know Parker and Bob would go through the atlas and talk about places. Bob loved the grandkids. And as we talk about grandkids and their sons and daughters and whatever, Bob would always bring up the grandkids, and he would always brag on them all. He was so proud of them. We were proud of him too, the man cards. Bob loved sharing. Dearly. Of all things, he would miss lunch with us to do some silly errand for you. But he did love you dearly, and that was true love, that he would miss us. As was mentioned earlier, Tony King introduced Sharon and Bob, and Tony described him as a country gentleman. That was true. He was kind, polite, generous, soft-spoken, relatively handsome. Our problem was we couldn't figure out what country he came from. We didn't understand what he was saying. Most importantly, Bob was a Christian.
Amen.
He loved and trusted God. We spoke, not too many men will do that, but we spoke about God. He loved to go to church. He loved the old hymns. Bob believed in prayer. It was expected. You did not leave his side unless you prayed with God. Bob wanted to follow the scriptures as best he could, and we talked, and Bob brought this up about baptism. And it seems that early in his younger days, he may have been baptized, and he told me that he called the church, wherever it was in New England, and wanted to verify his baptismal records. And the church had fire, I guess, and all those records at that particular time span had been destroyed. Whether that was the reason, I don't think it was. I said, will you baptize me? It was great. Sharon, Joanne, and I was afraid of using a baptistry because he had the tube in and all that stuff. We baptized Bob. And that was probably one of the greatest things I ever managed to do. We miss Bob already. We know he's with God, laughing and saying something to the effect, look who needs strokes now.